Welcome to Cordell and Cordell's Men's Divorce Podcast, moderated by Managing Partner and CEO Scott Trout, bringing you information for guys before, during, and after divorce, and everything related to family law. This podcast is not to be taken as legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established.
Hey, welcome back to the Men's Divorce and Cordell Cordell podcast. I'm Scott Trout, Managing Partner, CEO of Cordell and Cordell. And today we're going to bring you a relevant topic in the time of the year as we're kind of going back to school. And that is the issues that many parents, whether they're married still, going through the process, or divorced, face. And that is back to school issues. And I'm joined by partner Dorothy Ripka over in Colorado. Welcome, Dorothy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we get there, obviously, legal advice, we can't give it in this podcast. I say that all the time. The best way to handle your questions in detail and to get some strategic advice is to schedule a consultation. You can do that online by going to CordellCordell.com, and you can schedule it right there. You don't even have to pick up the phone. You just search the office closest to you. They'll give you the dates and the times and how you want to do it, in person, on the phone, via Zoom, WebEx, Teams, whatever is most convenient for you. You can do that. Or if you'd prefer, you can give us a call at 866-DADS-LAW, 866-DADS-LAW. All right, Dorothy, let's talk about it. So let's just assume we have, I think, the most relevant, the most frequent back to school issues occur. In fact, I'm dealing one with a client yesterday who just texted me or emailed me on this very issue, and he's divorced, is that they should pick up their divorce decree, right? And then start reading about these back to school, what it says. Maybe there's reference, maybe you have a child transitioning from middle school to another school because they're aging out of their current educational institution. So should they review their order first and foremost?
Absolutely. First thing to do is find that order wherever you have it and make sure you look and know what your rights are, what your responsibilities are. And if there are additional obligations in there, like you said, if we're transitioning to a new school age, what conferral requirements are there with you and your co-parent? Do you need to get on the phone with them? Do you need to make sure that there's discussion happening? Because it's school time. Everybody's getting back to school. And we have to make sure we're considering those things as close in time as possible to the start of school year.
And it may be that, you're the custodial parent. Maybe the kids, you're the residential parent for schooling purposes, and the kids go to the school where you live. So there is, I think it's so key. Some of I'll call the hidden provisions. They're not hidden. They're just tucked away in decrees that may require you to provide notice. They may require you to meet, confer, or collaborate and agree. They may require you to mediate any disputes relative to custody plans when it comes to choices of schools and a number of other things as well. And so that's why I think it's, as you say, it's important, because I can tell you that many occasions where our clients had a motion to modify over a school choice filed, there is provision in there that says that they were required to appoint a mediator and before court. And so we got it dismissed. I don't know if you see that very often.
Absolutely. And I think that's a case of someone not looking through their order and understanding their obligations. And sometimes they're thinking that only relates to school choice, or they're thinking that only relates to something, big, but it could be as simple as signing up for the play at school. If you're committing your child to something that could impact the other parent's time, that's something that you really need to understand in your order. What are your obligations to the other parent? And, really just to be a healthy co-parent, shouldn't that be a discussion that's happening? Shouldn't that be information you're sharing? And knowing what obligations you have, whether you have to share that through a medium like Talking Parents, or whether you can share that via email, you should understand what your obligations are, because so many times people don't think about it on the front end. And then, like you said, they find themselves in court defending it, or even worse, you don't think about it on the front end, and then it's too late for your child to participate in something, or it's too late to have those communications because the deadlines are passed. And so really, it's important to be thinking very proactively about making sure you understand those obligations and you're meeting your child's needs, because really, this is all about best interests of your children.
And we talk about back to school, what always comes to my mind typically is, either you're changing schools, moving school districts, going to college, but there's also the occasion where you have children who were what we call tender years, infants, underage in terms of school, and now they're going to school for the first time. And that could be an issue where you really should know their schedule, their needs before you do any or take any action, right?
Absolutely. And you don't necessarily know that if you're a parent who doesn't have a school age kid.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a new experience. You really need to see how your order covers that. But also, again, having those communications. I always recommend to clients having triannual meetings where 3 times a year they have some kind of communication. Some parents like to do it in person. Some parents do it in writing, whatever works best for you and your co-parent. But have that conversation. What extracurriculars do we want? What obligations do we want our child to have? What electives do we want them to take? Having a 6th grader, I'm already picking electives for my child. So you have to make sure those conversations are being had and think about them in terms of deadline. It's not just about the start of school. But right now sports are starting, different extracurriculars, different clubs, signups. Everything starts churning in the first couple of weeks of school. So those communications need to really get kicking off.
Yeah. And, I mentioned tender years or infant children at the time of the divorce, and you may happen to see a schedule that doesn't include a lot of overnights. If you're not the custodial parent, it may be frequent, weekly visits, a Wednesday, a Friday, day visits on Saturday, dinners, but no overnights. And so oftentimes I have clients who want to start engaging in getting overnights, as they should. But what conflicts it is back to school, as you say, all these extracurricular and the schedule routine and distance. And so that it does come into play, and which leads into kind of what we always call, and we're not going to get very technical, but the best interests of the child. That is really, we could have a subjective determination with each other about, as parents, is what is in their best interest, but that's what the court standard would be, is what they call this loose best interest standard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at all those factors. How old the child is, how far everyone lives, what are the school options, what impact is on the schedule. Because if dad has, for instance, parenting time after school until 6 p.m., and then the other co-parent, mom, signs up the kids for 3 days after school activities, impacting dad's time. And that's not something we want to see happen. And it can be purposeful, but a lot of times it's inadvertent because people aren't thinking about the schedule. They're thinking about, well, it'd be really great for my child to participate in this activity. So that's why those communications are so vital, if you can have them and if they're productive, obviously.
Yeah. That's a great example when you have a custodial parent who, it happens, they choose to schedule the school things on dad's days and not mom's time. And so it does. And so mom will say, well, hey, Julie is busy with, cheer and this meeting and this extracurricular. And here I'm thinking, well, does she have anything on your time? And so that means document, right? And not just oral. You may pick up the phone, and I'm a big fan of in-person communication or video, because email tends to get lost, tends to be misinterpreted. But in the case of family law, you do want to document your concerns and your requests in writing, right?
Absolutely. And you need to think about what's most productive. A lot of parents like to use the apps that are available out there. I mentioned Talking Parents earlier. Our Family Wizard's a really popular one as well. And sometimes those are really great options because they are uneditable. Once you put in a communication and you send and say, I'd like to sign up Johnny for soccer, it's on these days and it's this cost, it shows a stamp when you sent it. And it also shows when the other parent read it and when and if they responded. And those things are kept in a system that can't be edited by the participants. So it really helps show what's happened. It shows shows the history of what the communications have been, which if we get to that end point of needing to actually have court intervention, or even the middle point of having a mediator assist, it really can show what efforts were made and which parent is focusing on best interests, which parents be more reasonable. And those things are really helpful. Plus, I think just as an added bonus, it really helps you make sure you have done your due diligence, that you're complying. So it's like that shield and the sword, which is the benefit of using a documentation system like one of those apps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, courts and judges just don't want you to fire right off into a motion to modify without taking those extra steps and trying to. Their dockets are full. And for me, that's the best evidence, is to show and exhaust your non-judicial remedies and say, look, Judge, I did everything I could, but she responded to nothing and ignored me. And I think that's key. And you mentioned calendar use, or My Family Wizard. I think those are huge. In fact, we did a big podcast on calendar and different apps to use, which include My Family Wizard. So if you're wondering what that is, you can search our podcast for that. We talked about apps for family law. It's a wonderful, great, informative a podcast we did that highlighted maybe 5 or 6 or 7 different wonderful apps out there that I think serve that purpose with both communication and organization, calendar management. When you live in separate households, my family we have 5 kids and they're all over the country. And so we use a calendar app called Cozy. So we know where everyone is at one point. And it's just when you get distance between each other, whether it's because of divorce or just simple separation, those are so integral in keeping track. And so what it all comes down to, obviously, is if you've taken these steps, if you haven't, obviously you do them, but consult with an attorney. I started off the podcast by, look, the best way to do it is to have a consultation. I mean, that's where it starts, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes people think, well, I don't want to go to court, so I don't want to talk to an attorney. But that's not our only role. Our role is to help you think of ways that you can be an effective co-parent, you can prepare, you can document, and potentially keep you out of court, give you some advice on how to handle things. Then you're prepared if the ultimate outcome happens and you do need to file a motion and go to court, or alternatively, if you need our help in a mediation process, because most things like this, school issues, extracurriculars, they get resolved by some kind of an alternative versus court. They get resolved through mediation or some other kind of decision maker. So it's really important that you're thinking strategically, thinking ahead, and not thinking of an attorney as a last resort. It's really part of your planning process, in my opinion.
100%. Recently, a client reached out. We have a college-age child. Because in Missouri, the age of emancipation can go to 21. So a lot of states are 18. So child support technically continues, even though a child is living away from they'll just use mom's residence. And so our goal when the client consulted with me was, look, let's put together some case law. Let's put together, some things that you can give your ex-wife and say, look, why are we going to spend money on lawyers? Here's the law. The law says that the child support can be reduced during the period in which the child's away, because otherwise you're double dipping here. You're giving all this money to mom when she doesn't have those duplicative expenses. And so it was successful. Mom realized, she probably consulted with an attorney that said, yeah, you probably should negotiate this away. And we were able to negotiate a really good result, having not had to file something originally. Now we have to file it as a modification, but it's faster, cheaper, and less stress for everyone. I mean, that is huge it isn't as a last resort. I have to believe, I feel like, and I've always said, consultation with a lawyer could be the best hour you spent. It's like if I'm sick, having just to sit down with my doctor is the best hour to just figure out what it is. Is it something that needs attention? Do I need a prescription? What do I need? Rest? Whatever it is. I mean, it's the best investment of your time.
Well, I love the example you gave, because it's also child focused. It's about saying what's really best for our child here, because why would we waste all this money when we can use that money to support our kid who's getting their secondary education and post-secondary education and moving into adulthood? Why would we do that? We can still be child focused even with an older child. And so many times parents forget that, being child focused still applies even when we don't have little ones. And so that consultation was really the whole point of what we're talking about here, being prepared, getting a strategy together. And sometimes you really need that attorney to counsel you and figure out what the best way to do that is.
Yeah. And timing is important. A lot of people will say, well, I'll get to it, especially back to school issues. For me, I always say July, August, September is a big family law time, simply because I get a lot of relocation, choice of new school, actions where parents may have joint legal custody, and they're going back all the way to the front of our podcast, and that is review your order. The order says something like meet, confer, and agree, not just meet and confer on major decisions, for example, like choice of the school. And so we have custodial parents making choices of schools without consultation and agreement. And so timing is so critical, because timing is necessarily or not necessarily on your side, right?
Yeah, right now it's at the end, right? Like the tail end of the time period, but it's also never too late to think about what the future holds. And so as we started off the podcast talking about knowing what our obligations are, what our responsibilities are, thinking about what's best for our child in light of schedules and maturity, that's not something that just happens at the beginning of school. So you can translate that into what will happen in the next semester, what will happen in the summer, even what could happen next fall. It's never really too early to be planning for your child and their future, and thinking of ways you and your co-parent can make sure that what's happening is best for your kiddos.
Yeah. And it's one of the things we do. We are very focused on having checkups in our car. Making sure that oil is good, the tire pressure is good. We have our washer fluids topped up. It's topped off. But yet we don't have these annual or frequent checkups on our divorce. Hey, should I be thinking about something? Am I eligible for a modification? Could I save some money because child support would go down, or spousal support, or can I get more time? And that is key. It is timing. It is just having a conversation, I think, is a refocus. I think sometimes our focus is misplaced. Not that it shouldn't be to take care of a car because it's expensive, but we feel like there's no mechanism to do that in family law, and it's just so critical.
Yeah, and I think all of us would agree that have children, that they are our most important focus of our life. So, we want to make sure that they have the ability to have the best life possible. And if we don't understand our rights and remedies, then it's very difficult for us to provide that for them. And it is really a great, great point to make that while I suggest reviewing your order really on a frequent basis, at least annually, but obviously probably more frequently, and making sure that if you have questions, or if you think this might not apply anymore now that we don't have a preschool child anymore, why am I still paying daycare in my child support calculation? These are great things to come in, have a consultation with an attorney, talk about it, make sure. And worst case scenario, you find out everything's good. I think you feel a lot of security knowing that. It's a great way to be like, all right, I'm in good shape. I don't have to worry about this. So
it's like I had my will and trust reviewed. And I just want to make sure everything's still good. Laws change. The tax laws certainly change. This administration changed something significantly when it comes to retirement accounts, what they call the Secure Act. And I didn't know how that affected me. And so I went in and they're like, yeah, this affects you. We just need to make a real quick change to your documents. And it is comforting. And I'm like, oh boy, I'm glad I just reached out just to check, I didn't know. That's not my area of specialty is, estate planning and wills and trusts. And so it's important. So Dorothy, again. Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks.
I say it's a great point. And attorneys need checkups, right?
Yeah, totally.
Need checkups.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining. Great topic, relevant as everyone's going back to school and starting school. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So as we started off and as we ended, we talked about consulting with an attorney. I know that sounds, convenient for us, but the point is that's kind of what is so important. We can't understand your situation. And certainly you don't, and you don't know what the law changes are because it changes so frequently. We just had a massive change in Missouri as it relates to custody, and the legislature passed a bill. And so it may be appropriate, in terms of custody changes, where now equal time is the preferred way in Missouri. It is. That's where the courts start now. So huge. So it could affect you in custody. That's why it's important to have a consultation. It's easy to schedule. You can just go online and do it, as I said, or give us a call at 866-DADS-LAW. Love to meet with you. It's the best way to bring in your documents, bring in your decree, have a meeting, and really just be filled with knowledge. Knowledge gives you some comfort and some direction as to where you should go. So, this podcast, just like everything else, subscribe to Apple iTunes. You'll continue to get the updates when they're dropped. And look out for our virtual town hall coming up soon. If you have never heard of our virtual town hall, you can find out more information on our website at CordellCordell.com. You can go to our social media. And what is a virtual town hall? Well, for 30 minutes in the afternoon, you can log on, hear from a panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys live. We're going to talk about a topic, and then you have a chance to ask questions live and get answers right then and right there from the panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys. And best of all, it's free. So if you want more information, check out our social media, Instagram. You can go to Facebook, you can go to Twitter, and then you can go to CordellCordell.com. So until next time, have a great week.